friends. Welcome to the very start of Season 2 and Episode 39 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian for 12 years and counting, I found myself asking the question, where is the podcast that will help me do my job? I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that the ideas expressed by myself and my guests are our own, and they do not reflect those of our district. When incorporating research, I always cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast is something for you. Before we get started with today's episode, advice for a first-year librarian, as well as for the rest of us, I'd like to begin by saying thank you to James and Emily, fellow podcasters from Ohio. I really enjoyed our conversation and collaborating with you. I'll be sure to share out the episode we recorded this summer as soon as you post. Hello to Kathy from Illinois, who enjoys listening during her commute to work. Hello to another Kathy in Virginia, who sent a very kind email. And she said, quote, I appreciate your stories, advice, documents, and attachments from your shows, and your willingness to share your thoughts, whether popular to our masses or not. Plus, you had me at, you know nothing, Jon Snow, and more so, I drink and I know things. I can relate to both of these things because of Game of Thrones, end quote. For anyone who might not have realized, my episode, I've Learned I Still Have a Lot to Learn, posted on April 8th from Season 1, is just an excuse to incorporate Game of Thrones into my podcast. I really enjoyed having the opportunity to respond to listeners during the break between seasons. It helped me to keep motivated and was especially fun in planning Season 2. I wanted to say hi to Angela in Ohio and Tara in Tennessee, Lori in Texas, Ashley in DC, Tina in Pennsylvania, Amanda in Louisiana, Ashley in Washington, Miranda in Australia, and Alicia in Austria. A very special hello to Joanne and the team of school librarians in the Hamilton Southeastern School District in Indiana. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions either on Facebook or Twitter or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I will be sure to send you a podcast sticker. For today's topic, advice for a first-year librarian, as well as for the rest of us, I appreciate that depending on where you work, like Arizona, for example, school has been back in session since the end of July. Be that as it may, the content of today's episode would be worth hearing regardless if you've been in your library for a few weeks or a few years. For veterans, this episode can be a reminder of just how far you've come and a reminder of some of the best suggestions from fellow school librarians on how to tackle the unique demands of our job and adjust our mindset to avoid some of the pitfalls. I wanted to mention one more thing from the onset of this episode. There is an abundance of articles on advice for first-year teachers. This is where I pride myself on focusing on the experiences which are specific to school librarians and anyone else who works in school libraries. Do we have shared experiences with teachers? Absolutely. But as I assert in Season 1, we are the round peg in the square hole. We are constantly adjusting what we hear to apply to our libraries. To say that we have the largest classroom in the school is an oversimplification. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Ours is a challenging profession. The programs we run and the multitude of resources, our print and our digital collection, and the impact we have on an entire building, sometimes multiple buildings, are all the more reason that today's episode is specific to school librarians. This episode is a compilation of curated advice given by and intended for a listening audience of individuals who work in school libraries. As is the case with many episodes, be sure to check out the show notes for links and helpful resources. Several weeks ago, I had the opportunity to chat with Susan, who lives in New York. I wanted to share this conversation with listeners because after 30 years of working in school libraries, she still feels excited about being a school librarian. I think you'll find her incredibly sincere, and I appreciated how generous she was to share her perspectives. Now is my interview with Susan from New York. The first question I asked her was how long have you been a school librarian, and if she could tell me a little about her journey to becoming a school librarian.
Okay, my name is Susan Demick. I'm 57 years old. I've been a school librarian for 34 years. I always wanted to be a school librarian when I was a kid, and my parents all and everybody said, "Oh, you'll never make any money with that. You'll never get a job." Well, I've never been without a job, so it's all worked out. So that's how I became a school librarian. I liked my school librarian in high school. But I've ended up being an elementary school librarian for my whole career.
Wow. So tell me about your current library and what are your teaching responsibilities? What kind of,
hmm
what does an average day look like for you?
Okay, so I'm been in the same school where I am now for 31 years. So I have kids of kids that I had when I was, young and cute, and now I'm just old and cute. So it's kind of cute.
Wonderful.
uh, Go ahead.
No, I think that's wonderful. Tell me, are you on a fixed schedule, a flexible schedule?
Yes, I'm a fixed schedule. I have 21 classes. My school is K to 5, but we also have four self-contained skills classes, which are some of our little friends who need more help. And I work very closely with their teachers. I love them, and they come in and visit me a lot. I also am the gifted and talented teacher for my building for fourth and fifth grade. So, two full half days I'm teaching gifted and talented.
Oh, that's remarkable. So, tell me, going way back to when you were a rookie teacher, what was your very first library job like?
I worked for a maternity leave for someone who was had a baby, and I was there for about 6 months.
Wow. Can you tell me, when you graduated from library school, um, do you remember making mistakes? I share with my listeners all my mistakes, and because I figure somebody should learn from them. So, would you like to share any sort of missteps you made along the way?
Oh dear, how about going out drinking with my friends when I was young and cute and driving into school really sick?
Oh, yes. No, okay. I think that that is an excellent piece of advice, and I'm glad you said it because I wouldn't have thought to say it, but I think it's worth saying that
Oh yeah.
are not sympathetic to any of.
No, and your principal is definitely not sympathetic.
I think that's incredibly good advice, and no one should make that mistake. Can I ask you, what do you wish you had known going into your very first job as a school librarian?
Oh, I think I wish I had known how political schools can be.
Oh my gosh.
My very first job, I had a book questioned by a school board member. So, of course, the principal did not want to go through the selection policy or any of the um, anything. Thank God the high school librarian took over because she had tenure and she could deal with the principal. But especially small little schools. I've only really taught in small suburban schools, and there's a lot of politics.
I can't imagine facing I know that's one of my biggest fears is a challenge and having to do that your very first year. I mean, that's like being
hmm
thrown into the fire. That's incredible. Can I ask, is there something that you realized you wish you had learned in library school and you just arrived and realized, wow, that wasn't taught in library school?
Oh, I don't think classroom management is taught very well in library school. I thank God had an undergrad degree where I, had an education undergrad degree, but you don't have to have an undergrad degree in education to be a school librarian, at least not where I live. So I think sometimes we get a lot of young librarians who go in there who haven't had a lot of classroom management
Mhm.
teaching skills.
Well, and
And
like you, I've always been elementary, and where I learned, because I'll agree with you right there, I didn't have any classroom management instruction in my library preparation, and where I learned my best experience in learning classroom management was as a long-term sub. I substitute teacher for a year. The economy had tanked, and I was trying desperately to get a job, and I subbed in a lot of districts. I think we filed something like 27 W-2 forms that year. But every day I walked into a new room, and every day my abilities to manage a room full of strangers got a little bit better.
Yes, and you learn from older teachers by watching them and seeing what they're doing. And, there's lots of great books or YouTube or video, whatever you want to do. But that if you can't get their attention, you are lost.
Have you ever used the tricks of the teachers when they drop the kids off? Because I'll see when the teachers bring the kids up, I'm watching how they interact with their students, not just dropping them off, but also picking them up. And you learn some of those, just the classroom dynamic, and you can pick up on some of that from them coming to the library and picking them up after it's done. I'll tell you, I wish I had learned how to repair a book in library school. I remember sitting down with my box of ruined books. I didn't have the faintest idea what I was doing. That's where I made all of my mistakes. I was trying to repair those first books. It was a learning experience, and I got to admit there were some that didn't survive.
Oh, no, sometimes we can't save everything.
No. Tell me, I really appreciate your feedback. Can you tell me, is there anything else you would love to share with our first years who are tuning in and this is their first year on the job?
Sure. I mean, one of the things I really want to tell people is to get out of your library. Mm-hmm. Go make friends with your custodians, make friends with your school librarian or school secretary. Eat lunch in the faculty room. Don't eat lunch in the library. If they have a happy hour, go to it. Be a happy person.
Not on a Thursday.
Not on a Thursday, yeah. Oh, good grief. Now you know that I'm drinking.
Yes, but I think you're right, because a lot of times that first year, you're so busy trying to get things done that you think you're somehow catching up if you work through lunch, but you miss out on those opportunities to collaborate in the lunchroom, sort of informally, talking to your peers, hearing what they're doing in their classrooms. That's invaluable. If you afford to do that.
That's invaluable, but it also is invaluable that you need support. Mm-hmm. You need to have friends. You need to have people that care about you. Teaching is a tough profession. We have stress, and school librarianship has just changed over the years. We have more and more stress put on us. Make friends with people so that you have a support system. Well, and that is the most important thing.
Enjoy your job if you enjoy working with the people at your job.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what? There's always going to be that one or two who are never going to work with you.
I know. Our negative Nellies. Each building's got a negative Nelly. You just got to know which one.
Your head against the wall about them. Work with other people and have a good time.
Oh, you're wonderful. Susan, has your year started yet? I have to ask.
No. Oh, no. No. I have like 3 more weeks. Don't ruin it.
Well, I'll tell you what. This episode I will post probably around Labor Day, and I will certainly include you in the notes and I very much appreciate you sharing your expertise. The fact that you have remained committed to this noble profession is testament to your true commitment. So.
A lot of fun. I love it. If I didn't love it, I wouldn't do it anymore because I could retire.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you what, it's an inspiration, and I know there are a lot of new librarians out there who are just now getting into their libraries and ready to hit the ground running. So I appreciate you sharing what your life experience with us.
Well, you're welcome.
want to thank Susan so much for that conversation, especially because I took time away on what was probably a lovely summer night to talk about school, but it does provide a perfect segue into the rest of this episode, which will talk about advice for new librarians, and some of us who are not so new. I wanted to talk about relationship building, as well as time and prioritizing, some items about programming, and the mindset of a school librarian. So let's jump into the importance of building relationships with your fellow teachers. Obviously, you're going to want to become acquainted with everyone, and you'll build closer relationships with certain teachers. The ones I find most receptive are oftentimes your teacher leaders. Our building calls these teachers in charge, and they are oftentimes in education leadership programs and are slated to become next in line for administrative openings, but they are typically most likely to be responsive to assisting you, and because they want to exercise their own leadership skills, they're going to be more likely to collaborate with you and be supportive when you have questions. The other ones I find most incredibly supportive of a new librarian in the building are the ones who are slated to retire, because quite honestly, they have nothing to lose. They're on their way out. Not going to lie, teachers who are slated to retire that year have a smile on their face 183 days out of the school year. So definitely go to them with advice, with help, anytime you want to ask a question about the building, because quite honestly, they don't care. They're leaving that year. I do want to speak especially to building relationships with students. There is no better way to do this than to learn their names, and I'm horrible at this. First of all, a lot of times the kindergartners will already be coming to library with their name tags on because they are new to everybody. All the specials teachers are going to be unfamiliar with these kids. So honestly, many teachers do have name tags on their kids the first time they come to the specials, in this case, the library. I will share a couple of these tricks when I have an episode on the littles in your library, which will come out later this fall. But another thing that some of my friends do when it comes to learning students' names, because we have a couple hundred in the building, some of us have more, is to create little table tents with large index cards, and the kids can decorate those and have their names in big letters. I also use folders for my very little students to put any work that we do together, and in that case, their names are on labels in the folders, and I can always cheat and look at those names. And I play games of handing out their folders, and I'll go over some of those games when I do my Littles in the Library episode. Seating charts are huge. If you can use the attendance program in your building to create seating charts, or a class composite, if you're not going to use seating charts, that have the student's most recent school photo and their name, that's absolutely fantastic. I take the time to make seating charts, whether it's on the alphabet carpet or at the tables, just because it simplifies things and it helps me learn their names. There's another trick I'll share with you. I oftentimes teach siblings, and a really easy trick to remembering siblings is to simply refer to them by their last names. I have a set of brothers who look so similar that rather than risk botching their first names, I simply use their last names. Oh, Mr. Brown, how are you? And I have another group of 3 girls who could be confused for triplets, but they're all in different grades, and oftentimes I'll refer to them, oh, good morning, Miss McGuire, how are you today? And I'd get their first names wrong, but I know I nailed their last names. I do want to share some advice that was given to me by listeners, and many of these tweeted in or put it on Facebook or messaged me directly. Margaret from Michigan said, "Make the library welcoming to all, students, staff, and parents. Be flexible. Don't always go as planned, so make the best of it." I know this all sounds cliche, but it's true. And this is Margaret speaking. If you don't know the answer to a question, tell the teacher or the student you'll get back to them once you found the answer. Never tell somebody, I don't know. I looked for your information, but I can't find it, is a much nicer way to say things. And it's all about customer service. Our entire school population is our customer. And this is a theme that you'll hear throughout this episode because the mindset of a librarian is and has to be different than a classroom teacher. Ask for a tour of the building, and this is me speaking. I didn't know where the staff restroom was or where the staff ate lunch for 3 weeks in my first building. Not only was I too busy to ask, I was too busy to care because I never left my library. And it really wasn't a great start to the school year because I just needed a break. If you can, spend time walking in the halls before your first bell and during lunch. These transition times are a really great time to see the teacher dynamic with their students and the students with their friends. Peeking into the classrooms is a great way to learn about the classroom libraries that are there and the reading centers in each class. Make friends with the secretary and the building custodian. And I can't emphasize enough, make sure you acquaint yourself with the bookkeeper, the person who tells you your budget, places your orders, and is ultimately in charge of your budget and your account. Support for you not only comes from the people you work with in real life, but also in your PLN, your remote support. And this is exactly the point of the first of 10 tips for new school librarians, a post by Kelsey Bogan in her blog, Don't Shush Me, Adventures of a Future Ready High School Librarian, dated July 25th, 2019. Number 1 was get a support network pronto, and I've made sure to include a link to her blog in my show notes. And she includes some fantastic links, including how do I find other librarians to connect with. And in this case, Kelsey mentions how important it is to have a district mentor, to not only that, reach out to librarians that are obviously not in your building, but who work in your district, and also to join the professional librarians associations, not just your state organization, but also the ALA and the AASL. Kelsey goes on to include a lot of hashtags so that you can join social media groups and follow them on Twitter chats and on Facebook groups. It really is a great way to find your people remotely. Later this season, I'm going to have a great interview with Amanda Jones, who is a social media expert when it comes to librarians finding their support and promoting their program online. So be sure to tune in for that. Shifting gears to talk a little bit about timing and making priorities for your library, Christine from Illinois made a couple good suggestions. First of all, create a multi-year plan. You do not have to tackle it all, even though the temptation will be overwhelming. Forge relationships first with students and teachers. The collection might be a mess, but it'll still be there when you have a better handle on things and can really go after it with a plan and a better handle on how it's used in your library. Melissa from Australia also had some great advice when it comes to time management. She said, perhaps time management of our administrative time. As a teacher, we only get 2 hours of administrative time per week, and now as a librarian, to get 7 hours a week is quite a difference. I remember actually having to plan out my time carefully because I wasn't used to it. I have to concur with what Melissa said because when I have time that's non-instructional, I create those lists and I get very excited about all the things I'm going to tackle during that time. And if you have a list going of how you're going to spend that collection time, then at least you won't waste that time trying to remember, what was it I was going to do today? Continuing with our listener advice, Noli from Utah said, seating charts will help in classroom management and how to get to know their names. Procedure. Go over how you want them to act in library. This is Noli. And if they forget, go over it again. First lesson, be about you, your family. make a PowerPoint, etc., to show your favorite authors or books or what you did that summer. I make library cards with their names on it, with a student barcode on the back. It makes checkout fun, quicker, and easier. A lot of prep getting ready, but worth it. They say it takes 3 to 5 years to make that library your own, so don't feel overwhelmed. Make it the place everyone wants to be. Good luck. We have the best job around. And I have to agree with all of this. Actually, I will be recording an episode sometime this season about being overwhelmed, because it seems to be a very common feeling by a lot of librarians. But I took this piece of advice myself, and over the summer, I actually created they're called a Powtoon. It's an animated little slideshow with music, and I included pictures of myself when I'm a little kid. And in fact, I'll include a link in the show notes, and you can see this little Powtoon I made. It's not for the teachers, it's for the students. I also made a Powtoon to introduce myself to the teachers. I switch buildings a lot, and I really like this advice because when people get to know you, and the faster they get to know you, the more likely they are to smile and look forward to seeing you and converse, and it's a great way to start building that relationship quickly. So this past August, I made time to create not only an introductory little Powtoon that I show my students, but also a little introductory Powtoon that I show my teachers. My teaching schedule is such that I have 3 new buildings this year, and those are all new teachers and all new administrators. And I sent that little video out about 2 weeks before school started. Rebecca from Tennessee wanted to chime in, and she said, "Don't feel like you have to do everything your first year. Maybe wait a bit to tackle genrefying, major weeding, etc. Get to know your students, teachers, and collection first. Plan good lessons. Think through your procedures for returning books, checking out, etc." This is Amy. I wanted to say a little something about prioritizing. And I think that this comes with being in a library for a long time. You look around and realize it's time to go home. You've been at work way too long, but you're not done. And then you realize, I'm not ever going to be done. In my department meeting today, somebody brought up this cool quote, and I wanted to share it with you. And the quote is, "You can do anything, but you can't do everything." And as best as I can tell, this quote is attributed to David Allen, author of Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity. But that's something to keep in mind, because when you look at your library and you have to go home and you realize there's still stuff waiting for you to do, well, it's going to be there tomorrow when you get there, and it's okay. Close the door, make sure you turn the light off, you didn't leave your lunch, and go home, and you can start all over again tomorrow. Also, recognize that a transformation of your library is going to take time. Chip away at your priorities. Make sure that you have some short-term goals, as well as ones that are going to require some time and an investment on the part of your budget. That way you'll see some results this year and the year after, and then plan for those projects which will take longer time and more money. Shifting gears to some programming suggestions, Sandy, who is a librarian in Massachusetts by way of Chicago and Wisconsin, recommended creating a library advisory board. And I think this is probably more of like a middle school, high school, but I do know some elementary schools who use students to discuss the programming of the library. And in this case, she said, confer with this library advisory board about programming. Kids get involved in planning for the Library Olympics, fundraising, and the Read Across America program. I really enjoyed a blog post by Barbara Ruth Pasiotti, a retired middle school librarian, titled 3 Strategies for a First-Time School Librarian. I've included a link in the show notes. One piece of advice I felt would be particularly reassuring to a first-year librarian is to, quote, Leave the library as it is until you know what it needs, end quote. And while this might be obvious for a project like weeding, it also pertains to rearranging the furniture and reconfiguring major parts or aspects of your collection and your current library program. Mrs. P, as she is known, described an activity to do with your staff if you are brand new to a building. And she used index cards to ask 2 questions at a staff meeting. Give 1 suggestion to the school librarian and 1 suggestion to the school library. It's possible you may prefer to pose these questions as a Google form, which does allow respondents to remain anonymous, although some staff may choose to opt out. The responses you will get will give you an idea of the current attitude that the staff has towards the library and possibly a list of directions that you can head in, knowing that the staff will appreciate your efforts. Another blog post by Nikki D. Robertson titled 5 Tips for New School Librarians, parentheses, and those who aren't so new, which was updated on August 6, 2019. I've included a link in the show notes. What stands out to me is the directive, quote, "It's not about you," end quote. Nikki goes on to say, quote, "The library is a service industry. You are there to serve the needs of your administration, teachers, and students, not your own agenda." Continuing, whether you are an elementary, middle, or high school librarian, whether you work with a fixed or flex schedule, setting the right tone for the library in which all voices are heard is crucial to a successful, happy library, end quote. I believe this sentiment speaks to the mindset of a school librarian and distinguishes it from that of a classroom teacher. It ties in nicely with Miss P's idea to solicit suggestions from the staff. I did want to add that empowering students' voices in the library will be an episode scheduled later this season. Kimberly in Illinois had some great suggestions, and I wanted to include them today. Quote, "Be prepared for a lot of meetings. Know the date when you have to spend your budget money by. Let the students know that you value their input and make sure to ask them for book recommendations and buy those books. It is their library. Know who's responsible for book fairs. Be prepared to give your library up for things like book fairs. Know that teachers often think of specials teachers as people who have their students so they can have plan time. Work overtime to try and change that perception. Finally, social media is your friend. Join as many Facebook librarian groups as you can. Follow librarians, authors, and educators on Twitter. I got more ideas and inspiration from social media than anywhere else." Kimberly continues, "Jump in, share what you're doing. It'll make a huge difference. Good luck." I'd like to agree with Kimberly here, and especially when it comes to venting on Facebook, because not only do you get a great deal of inspiration and a lot of ideas that we can share with one another, you can also vent and express your frustration and share some of your problems, and you're going to get some very genuine support and some great ideas on how to solve some of those challenges. Kim from Virginia this time said, quote, "There may be a lot of changes that need to be made. Just remember, change doesn't happen overnight. Not everything can be accomplished in the first year, and that is okay. It may feel overwhelming at times, but keep looking for the bright spots. They happen more often than you think in the craziness of your first year. You would not be the first school librarian to cry behind your circulation desk." Tracy from Missouri said, quote, "Kids are worth more than any book, even the brand new ones. It takes guts for kids to tell you the book was damaged. Let them know that they did the right thing in telling you. Yes, charge them for the damage, but do so kindly." And I'd like to throw in some of my own advice here at this point. And I wanted to say, first of all, that changing routines and procedures can be a little confusing, but it's going to be more confusing for you. Don't be afraid to start something in the middle of the year. I thought it might confuse kids if I decided to do something, say, start at November or December, and there's no reason why you can't change the way you do something just because it isn't the first week of the school. A friend of mine, Gwen, who's a fellow school librarian in Michigan and an instructor for librarians in training who are working towards their certificates, said, "Keep a smile on your face and your ears open for student and staff needs. Get to know the curriculum and to find collaboration opportunities. It's all about relationships. Give yourself permission to make mistakes. Take time to make changes." And I really like Gwen's advice because we really shouldn't lock ourselves into starting something and feeling like you have to stay that way the entire school year. If you need to change, do something different, try something new, you shouldn't be afraid to do that. I also want to throw in another piece of important advice, and that is to listen. When you meet your administrator to discuss your goals, listen to what your principal has to say. Rather than offer a litany of things that you would like to do that school year, listen to what your principal wants. My principal basically gave me a goal for my first year for my evaluation. Had I started making suggestions, I would have created a great deal of expectation on my principal's part. Those to-do items are still on your list, but when you're brand new, you can keep that list of priorities to yourself. Listen to your principal, and be reasonable with the goals that you set that year. Ask the teachers. Another trick I learned, when you see the teachers who are successful and their students do really well at something, ask them, "What's your secret? How'd you do that?" I have one teacher in my building whose students are phenomenal at silent reading. They get their library books, they sit down, and they are so happy they don't even notice your teacher has come to the door ready to pick them up. And I asked her, I said, "What's your secret? Your class is amazing." And not only is the teacher incredibly flattered, the teacher is happy to share with you the strategies they use in their classrooms. So never be afraid to ask. One of my favorite instructors in library school told us, if your bookshelves are beautifully and meticulously organized and not a single book is out of place, you're doing something terribly wrong. Putting the books back on the shelf, yes. Is that important? Does it have to happen? No, not really. If the books that got checked in stay on the cart, and you push that cart in the middle of the room and let the kids check off of the cart, those are usually the best, most popular, well-circulated books anyway. Don't worry about shelving books. If you leave and there's an entire cart of books waiting for you when you come in the next day, nobody is going to notice except for you. I did want to throw in at this point also a book recommendation that I have from Hilda K. Weisberg. She co-authored a book with Ruth Tour called New on the Job, A School Librarian's Guide to Success, 2nd edition, published by the ALA. And you can find this on their website. I also included a link in their show notes. Their accolades and leadership in the field of school library is impressive, and they have teamed up actually to write several books. Another piece of advice I'd like to give you is about your background in kid literature. If you're like me and you find yourself working in a library without that background that you need, whether it's for elementary or middle or high school, immerse yourself in your collection and listen to audiobooks just to get a feel for each of the books so you can talk about them and recommend them, or in my case, decide whether or not you want to buy them. It's no small secret that I'm a huge fan of podcasts, and I lean on podcasts which focus on reviewing kid literature. Call it a crutch or a cheat. Know the tricks of the trade. Podcasts on Kidlit, which are my favorite, I will be sure to include this list in the show notes so you can refer to it. The Books Between Podcasts with host Corrina Allen, the Children's Book Podcast hosted by Matthew Winner, Kidlit These Days with Karina Glaser and Matthew Winner, The Yarn with Travis Jonker and Colby Sharp, Scholastic Reads with Suzanne McCabe, Kidlit Women with Grace Lynn and Alvina Ling, Book Clubs for Kids with Kitty Feldy, Lifelines, Books That Bridge the Divide with Anne Braden and Sadia Faruqi. And if you hadn't noticed, I have this elementary bias. So I know that there are a lot of YA lit review podcasts out there. I am guessing at some point, if I ever get moved to the middle school or high school, I'm going to become very familiar with those podcasts as well. I'm going to also include a link to a Book Riot podcast from April 26, 2019, written by Sarah Davis, titled 15 of the Absolute Best Podcasts for Children's Books. You'll definitely see some crossover with my own recommendations. This is a tremendous help, listening to Kidlit reviews, because you will familiarize yourself with the books on your shelves, the titles you want to purchase. You'll also have a great deal more confidence speaking to the books that you are going to recommend with students during your book checkout. I think at this point, that's a lot of advice. I think I'm going to take a hard turn right now and end this episode, because at the risk of overwhelming our new school librarians, I really think that this is probably a great deal of information to take in at one time. I'd like to extend a very special thank you to absolutely every single person who chimed in, be it our voice recording and our interview and the Facebook and Twitter. And it was fantastic to get all those perspectives together. It really made this podcast so meaningful to listeners. And the feedback really does help with the direction of this second season. I welcome you and anyone else listening to reach out with episode suggestions, either on Facebook or Twitter, or using the email address schoollibrarians@gmail.com. Again, if you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. I'd like to thank you for listening today. The topic for our next episode will be advocating for the LGBTQ+ and all students, including an interview with Joy Ann Boudreau. I hope you will tune in.